Welcome back, everyone, to Merge Conflict, your weekly developer podcast, talking about all things about development and fun things in the world. If you missed out on our recent Patreon, it was a doozy. I talked about cable internet and me calling my internet service provider for 35 minutes. That being said, the Patreon exclusive, Frank, was only 15 minutes, so it was pretty good. It was like a really good summary.
I felt like I failed at tech support. You told it was a tech support story. Everyone loves a good tech support story, but I failed at being the meta tech support. I couldn't help you in the end. Neither really do I think you were helped in the beginning. So we'll find out next week. We'll get some follow-up.
We'll see if my internet continues to work. It is working currently, and so is yours on that magical Starlink satellite goodness. But Frank, before we get into this week's podcast, a friendly reminder, I'm going to do an NPR shout out, which this is what NPR does. They go, hey friends, before we get into this week's podcast, make sure you hit that follow and subscribe button so you get all new Merge Conflicts podcasts on your device. And if you're using Apple Podcasts, you gotta make sure you hit that follow button up there. If you're over on any other app, just hit the subscribe or follow, do all the things. If you're on YouTube, welcome. That's awesome. This is a podcast that Frank and I do for the last 8,000 years. You can hit subscribe on YouTube. You get notified every time I put out a new podcast every Monday. Do it. Thanks. Now on to the show.
Hello, James. That was great. I you know what? I'm terrible. I've never actually used the Apple Podcast app. I used it once when it was the reel-to-reel thing, but I think they got rid of the reels. Sad.
Yeah. Well, .NET 9 is right around the corner, Frank. We talked about RC1, RC2. The things came out. I recently did a .NET MAUI podcast with my good friend David Ortnow. I've been updating all of my .NET MAUI apps and samples and workshops to .NET 9. I just LinkedIn posted. That's where I do my posting, on the LinkedIn. You can subscribe, follow Creator Mode, James Montemagno. I had a coworker today that was like, hey, like this person like is interesting in contacting, blah, blah. I was like, oh yeah, just give my email. They're like, oh, they're on X. So like they might just reach out there. And I go, I'm not on social media. So it's not gonna work.
No. You're just on the social media very few other people are on. That's what you've decided to do as a true hipster. Good job.
I'm in the .NET developer group, and it has 600,000 people in it. That's pretty cool. That's a lot of people.
Is it true?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's insane.
You go to .dot.net, and there's a community, community.
I've heard of
on the tab. And it says where to connect, and it says LinkedIn. It's the number one thing. And it'll take you to a LinkedIn group, which has a bunch of people that moderate it from the community, from AWS, from Microsoft, a bunch of community people. And people post a bunch of stuff. You can just join and you can get notified. And there's stuff from the team members at Microsoft. There's things from me sometimes. I post stuff there. I also post on my normal account too, but this is kind of cool. You see stuff. And actually, funnily enough, the topic that we're going to talk about is on here from our good friends over at Syncfusion on a like not a sponsored pod.
No.
This week's podcast.
Not a commercial.
This week's podcast brought to you by Frank's long hair.
Hi. Hello. This is awkward because Syncfusion was a longtime sponsor of the pod, and
let's be clear, we decided to have no sponsors on the podcast. It wasn't that Syncfusion abandoned us. Okay,
James.
Every one of our sponsors are great. I said, I don't want your money. Only Patreon subscribers, which have gone down a little bit. So Frank needs the money. He can barely pay for his star.
Anyway, thank you for that intro. So Syncfusion did something pretty cool, and honestly, I only just learned about it today. And it
happened today.
Sure, you've known about it forever. Okay, I only learned about it a few hours ago. I'm wondering how long you've known about it. Anyway, Syncfusion, longtime sponsor of the show. They make wonderful controls for we're all developers. We're writing apps. We need controls because no one wants to write controls. They're a pain in the butt. So Maui comes with some things, but there's a lot of room. There's a lot of controls that you could really make use of in an app that don't come with Maui. And Syncfusion, for the longest time, has always provided a wonderful assortment of controls that we promoted on the show. And now, to my amazement, James, it looks like a lot of those controls, or at least definitely a lot of the ones you want to use, are open sourced now. And just up on a GitHub. You can just go download them and just use these controls. I'm sure there's a NuGet too, but just go use these controls, whatever. I'm kind of amazed. How long have you known about this?
I cannot. I just found out about it today when I was reading the blog post. I at least help review blog posts. I knew about it for at least a few days. No, on Syncfusion, so there's a lot of control vendors out in the ecosystem, and some of them do have like free trials. Some have like free controls. There's obviously amazing controls by the community. Now, if you go over to, they redid this page a little bit. This is cool. Mobile.net MAUI. Cool. They have over 60 plus controls in their toolkit. So there's a lot of things in there, right? So they have AI assistants, chats, Kanban boards. They have all these really specially document processors that we've talked about, right? Again, not sponsored. Now in this though, like you said, there are, 15 controls, something like that, 14 controls. Yeah. So charts, carousel, navigation drawer, charts. I think I said that, but there's Cartesian charts, circular charts, pyramid charts, funnel charts, polar charts. There's a cool carousel thingy. There's a tab view. Actually, that's pretty cool.
Exactly.
A segmented control. Very cool. A
navigation
chip view.
Drawer. Yeah.
Effects view, shimmers. I've actually used a lot of these controls, funnily enough, in my Animal Crossing app that I had a long time ago that I used almost every Syncfusion control under the sun. So like, especially the text input layouts that give you a lot of different options to make your apps look the same, like Android-esque style, very customizable navigation. So very cool. And yeah, it's just all open source and out there for you to take and put into your application. They're obviously actively developing it because it's also in their main toolkit too, right?
Right. So I should just say like charts, like just go get this for the charts. There are a lot of good charting solutions for Maui, but you can never have too many.
Yeah.
I think just having a plethora of charts in your app, apps should be graphical and all that stuff. And it's, as someone who loves to write graphics code, and I'm sure I've said this during a sponsor read, I love to write graphics code. I love to write my own chart renderers. I don't ever want to do it again, though. I'm always trying to use someone else's code for that these days. Pretty cool. And then, so it's the charts, and then it's a lot of just the little things, the little fine touches that you want to add to your app. I wish Shimmer is Shimmer the new marquee. Did you add Shimmer to your app? What did you shimmer in your app?
Well, so there's like the effect view, which is like when you tap it, it does a little ripple. It's very Android-y, which is nice. Good little interactive. Okay. Shimmer is good for like loading data in your application. So instead of having a blank screen and a little thing, there's a bunch of built-in, basically like, is it a video, is it an article, is it shopping, and then it'll just kind of shimmer and kind of do this kind of custom wave animation. You see in a bunch of applications.
Oh, see, I totally misread that one. I was hoping it was more of a text marquee thing, or like under construction, it made my text shimmer. That makes a lot more sense, what you just described.
There's two blogs that we'll put in the show notes. One is to the blog post, which goes into not only just this, but we'll talk about the next thing that happened. But the blog post from Syncfusion has not only the list of controls, but images of all the controls too. So you can kind of get really hands-on, which is pretty helpful. And I kind of think David should have, I guess they want to, it's two different blogs. So I think the blog on the .NET blog is a little bit different context. It's like, hey, this thing happened, but also, which we'll talk about. But yeah, I think this is, great if you use one control, the other control. There is a NuGet. It's what I like about this is that it's a single NuGet that everything's in. And Frank, zero dependencies.
Yeah, well, okay, I believe that because the reason I didn't get to see all the images is I just went straight to the GitHub.
Of course you did.
Normally something like this, because these were toolkits, yeah, you would just go get the NuGet, install it, and then you'd get the IntelliSense and everything. And that's kind of, I'd wander around and try to figure out how to use these things that way. But this is the first time I actually kind of just dove into the source code itself. And so that's what I always appreciate about the open source. In practice, yeah, of course, I'm just going to go get the NuGet. That's the smart way to use this thing. But I couldn't help myself to just dive straight into the code and see like, oh, so what is the state of the art? How are people writing custom controls? Because I constantly have a debate with myself on how to structure my own custom controls in my apps for like Maui, especially when it comes to cross-platform differences and stuff. Like, I'm sorry, I'm going to go down a little rabbit hole right now. In like the default Maui template, there's a platforms folder, and I try to put all my platforms code in the platforms folder because that seems like a reasonable place to put it. But I was just noticing in their code, they don't really have a platforms folder. Instead, they just do the classic if-defs right in the code. And honestly, it put a smile on my face because that's how I want to do things. I think it's just the template with its platforms folder that just kept making me put platform code in the platform folder. But it really just made me smile. I'm like, oh yeah, actually, the platform differences are really small. And you actually can get away with just a few if-defs here or there. Sorry, I just went down that rabbit hole, but it was fun. That's the fun of open source. You can just go dive into, these are well debugged, thoroughly tested controls. So it's always fun to just see how they're actually implemented.
Yeah, and there's a lot of code in here. I mean, like if you do some, like the shimmer, for example, like, yeah, there's a drawable view and they're doing a bunch of, I mean, there's a lot of lines of code. There's a lot of math that's happening in here. And there's a lot of like adjustments and doing this and doing that, like all sorts of stuff. Like the shimmer is like 1,000 lines of code, but they're painting, they're doing canvases, they're doing a bunch of draw stuff, and like there's cross-platform drawing, right? That's built into .NET MAUI, which is probably what they're using for a lot of the stuff, with their custom drawn controls and other things like that. Some are just, hey, the chip, for example, is a button, but it's a custom looking button that's doing this other stuff, right? And obviously, other things are doing their own custom stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of code in here, and it's all under MIT, so it's an MIT license.
Yeah. Okay. The license is cool. We'll get back to that. It's the chips. I like the chips. I use their chips things and everything. I don't know. I hate writing button states and trying to figure out how to like make buttons look checked and not checked. It's always kind of a pain in the butt on mobile, especially because coming from desktop, there were always standards. There's checkboxes and radial boxes, but those are just so ugly on mobile. You can't do those. So you always end up having to write your own. I never call them chips. I came up with my own terrible names, but I do chips all the time in my apps. They're very important. And so I love having like a standard built one. MIT license. Great. That's the license I use. I don't know why. I like MIT.
It's a good one. I'm a fan of it.
This is fun. But the segmented control, I think, is also kind of neat because I've been trying to do a lot of Mac and iOS stuff, and this is where you always get into these big differences between what's a segmented control, what's a tab view, and these kinds of things. And I've really just had to if-def my code and just implement like specific platform versions for each one, and it gets tiring and all that kind of stuff. So I'm hoping to steal a lot of these controls and just be like, you know what? This custom segmented control is good enough for pretty much every scenario, and I'll just kind of go with that. James, I'm feeling a little bit bad. I remember maybe 10 years ago in this podcast, I think we just went on and on about native controls only. But these days, I'm just like, hey, custom rendered control. Great.
Yeah, it's good.
In there.
Yeah, some of them, it's like, based on what you need. And like some of these things are built in, right? Like there is obviously a flyout navigation, but they have their own navigation drawer that has like different things on it. Like there is a tab view, right? Which is, there are tabs in .NET MAUI, but, is this going to have adjustable widths and icons and different styles and different things that it may have? Like it might just have more things, right? So it's always cool to have more things in the box, is my opinion, out there, is putting things however you want them to look and feel, and that's in there. And I like that basically these controls were paid controls that kind of just like moved over into this nice toolkit that it's all in one. So good. Yeah, we got it. Just 15 minutes in, shipped it, done.
Well, okay, just a word of caution. Don't put carousel. Just don't use carousel, please, everyone. Carousel was cute on the iPhone 1, but I have yet to see an app do carousel correctly, so please don't put that one in.
If you need it, I'm just saying, put it in there.
Did your app have a carousel? I know everyone does it because they're very flashy and they're cute, but do apps really need a carousel?
You know,
charts. More charts.
Not necessarily like the carousel view that they're looking at in this. However, if you were to actually make it so they're more like a rectangle-y type shape, you've sort of seen that where they kind of flip left and right, like through different options. That's a carousel. Yeah.
That's true. I am a fan of being able to partially see what's to the left and partially see what's to the right. I think it's the heavily stacked carousel that I don't like. But yeah, if it's a lightly stacked one. Fair enough. You got me.
Yeah. So it's good. There's good. I always like more free controls that are out there. There's all sorts of good stuff out there. The other part of the blog post that is out there that might be of interest, Frank, is...
Yes?
He hasn't read it yet.
No, I don't read blog posts. I read source code, James.
There's a few other things. So one, there's 3 total things. So we're literally just reading a blog post, so you go read and we'll just summarize it. And frankly, his thoughts. One is that in .NET 9, so for GA, which is again right around the corner, there's going to be a new app template that ships in the box. And it is going to be like a full-fledged sample application. In fact, you can take a look at the pull request and all the images, Frank Krueger, if you read the blog post. This is going to have all sorts of good stuff in there, including MVVM patterns, a database with SQLite, hopefully .NET. It's going to have navigation, view refreshing, and a bunch of other common patterns. A lot of people do want a file new, but it's going to feature all of the controls. So if you're really interested, it'll be a showcase for the controls, which is kind of cool.
I kind of like this. This is kind of a perennial topic on our podcast of what should a new template be? And I think we've all settled into kind of a middle ground where I think we're all pretty happy with the Maui template because it shows you a page or two, or I forget how many pages.
It does.
I kind of like one page. That's it. I thought it was a tab view. Okay.
Just one.
It's like the about page. Yeah.
Yeah.
This I'm kind of digging. Okay. For context, a friend of mine who is a programmer, a .NET developer, was asking, they want to write a mobile app and they're like, oh, should I learn Android and should I learn Swift and do iOS? And I'm like, why don't you just do everything in Maui? It's going to be so much easier. But it's still going to be a learning curve, right? It's still something new to learn. At least they already know .NET. But I was trying to think of an example just like this, where it's like, here's just everything. Don't actually use this as your UI, but keep these pages around, keep these assortments of controls around so that you can just go back and reference them and see how to actually add them into your app. So I didn't know this template existed, but I was already imagining this, like, go find this thing that just has everything in it and then just slowly piece together your app throughout it. That's why the Syncfusion thing was on my mind also, because I was just trying to find controls for my friend. And so now you're showing me this thing. What do we call this? The Uber template? The superset template? The super template. It's a super template.
It's a super template. Yeah, I think it's an app template. It's a full app template. I struggle with app templates. Back in the Xamarin days, we spent a lot of time, the engineering team, the PM team, the evangelism team, at Xamarin, then at Microsoft, doing a lot of research on templates, and we've talked about it. And we've gone through a lot of phases of templates, even in Xcode and in Android Studio, there's a lot of phases of templates of, is it more, is it less? There was a time at one point that basically when you created a Xamarin Forms app, it almost did give you a really full fleshed application. It gave you a web API backend that would call, it would store your database, stuff in the database. It was just mostly to-do list items, you know what I mean? And like hello screen showed you navigation, showed you MVVM, did a lot of stuff. But it was only what was built in mostly to the box. In fact, maybe it didn't do a database because it wasn't built in. It was like a reliance on a NuGet. But and that went through phases. And Xamarin Forms, when you created a Xamarin Forms app, there used to be a pop-up that was like, oh, do you want this style or that style? And then there was still kind of some stuff, but mostly a lot of people did blank app. This app is great if you're like, hey, I want to do a demo, go on stage, or I'm exploring .NET MAUI for the first time and look at all this cool stuff that it can do, right? It's kind of a showcase. It's like a template showcase in a way. Because a lot of people I've read a lot of Reddit posts and a lot of like online discussion, like with Blazor. They're like, oh, why don't I do file new Blazor? And it gives me like a, admin portal or whatever, right? I think Vue does that maybe, or maybe someone else does. It gives me a full thing or whatever. Well, templates you got to maintain them, right? And this is a pretty chunky template. So I'm pleased to see it and kind of see how it goes. Yeah.
It's chunky, but it's not so bad. There's like 5 pages.
Yeah. Few controls.
5-ish controls.
Yeah, it's like a small
5-ish models.
It's like a small app.
5-ish view models, and then some data. Like, I think it's reasonable.
Yeah.
Especially because these are all things you're going to have to play off of anyway. Like, okay, maybe we don't need 10 different repositories for this thing. Like, okay, that was over-engineered a little bit. But, someone's going to take this. They're going to take that tag repository and be like, well, I need tags in my app. So I'm going to start with that. And, I mean, it's honestly how I usually learn from things. That's the perspective I'm taking on this, is like someone who hasn't done it before. Me, I'm probably going to start with the blank one still, but I'm going to keep this one around just as a reference for the XAML of how to add all the controls to it and everything. So it is chonky, but I've seen a lot worse. I remember in the Windows 8 days, Windows RT days, when you did file new project, the app itself was very small. They just gave you like one main page, but they generated like 8,000 tons of XAML styles and things like that. Basically useless stuff. So I look at it from like a signal to noise ratio. The signal seems decently high with this, aside from the abundance of repositories.
Yeah. I guess I'm fascinated. So I think all of it, I haven't reviewed it. I like that it's using the MVVM toolkit. So it's going to use source generators, going to use all that stuff for MVVM stuff, which I'm a fan of. I think that's a good out-of-the-box example. It's using the .NET MAUI community toolkit. So it's going to have a bunch of this stuff. Like, I think all that stuff is like, I always recommend people just get in here, right? The one question I have is, and actually in the blog post it says, please go critique, give feedback, right? Mm-hmm. So it is using Microsoft Data SQLite.core, which is a ADO.NET abstraction for connections, commands, data readers, and so on, which means it is sending like SQL commands with SQLite raw. So not using SQLite PCL, PCL.
No.
How do you feel about that?
Oh, it's Microsoft. They love their ADO.NET. I just can't fight it. I'm not gonna. It's fine. It's fine, James. Okay. Look, if you want to do your own database migrations, if you want to spend half of your life mapping data between ADO objects and your data source, go ahead, use theirs. If you don't, use mine.
That's my only feedback. I probably got to go see, like, hey, should we just, I don't know, use this thing over here? It's all using SQL PCL raw under the hood.
Right. That's the nice thing. And what it's really using, they're all using SQLite. So that's what's cool. So use whatever database access layer you like. I'm not here to push it, though mine is small and fast and works fine.
Yeah. All right. I like that. All right. That's the only thing. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And you can go take a look. The pull request has all the photos. By the way, all this stuff works on iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows. We should point that out. Works everywhere. So if you're building a desktop app or a mobile app.
Is this super template, the super template, is it going in? Is this going to be a part of the official release?
It says right here, it says, in .NET 9, we're collaborating with Syncfusion on a new project template that includes it. The app showcases that will be available in our .NET 9 release, and you can take a look at it now.
All right.
I look forward to your feedback. Yeah.
No, I do mean it. It's kind of nice that this is just in the box, rather than like going to find a blog post that might be a few years out of date, especially because .NET moves pretty fast these days. A new version every year. So it's nice that this is just kind of baked in, and it'll be someone's job to maintain it and keep it all up to date. And
in the box.
We'll have a reliable super template.
Yeah. Last thing, it says here that Syncfusion is also investing their expertise as control builders into .NET MAUI by openly contributing on issues and submitting PRs directly into the .NET MAUI repo on GitHub to improve the quality of .NET MAUI. Syncfusion believes in the future of .NET MAUI as a modern cross-platform client solution for .NET developers, is committed to its health and growth. Since their team of experienced engineers started contributing this summer, you may have noticed they resolved over 75 product issues, and they're just getting started.
Well, bravo. It's always great to see some bigger companies throwing some weight and money and effort behind. I mean, Maui's open source, but we all basically look to Microsoft to do the majority of the work. So it's nice to see other companies really chipping into the open source effort. So bravo. I have not contributed 75 bug fixes to Maui. I know that much. So they've outclassed me. Maybe you have. I bet you have.
No, I think I have. I guess if I went to github.com/.net.
If we include extensions, you know.
Barely. I guess I've updated a few repos. If I go to insights, I guess, I mean, I can't even show up anywhere, I'm sure. I have to scroll down real low. I probably have done something. I don't know.
I have one bug fix that I'd even have to code. I just complained enough that someone fixed it. So I take credit for that one because my complaint was good enough that they were able to fix it and I didn't have to code the fix. So
okay.
That's my accomplishment.
I am somehow the number 13th most contributor on the project with 380 commits. That doesn't make any sense.
Is that all docs? No, I didn't mean to. No, I'm sure it's all low-level code. It's the extensions. They had to have merged in the extension.
I think that's what it is, because these are all from like 2018.
That's funny. Look at you, master programmer.
I can look at the commits. Oh, cool.
Number cool. 13 contributor to Maui.
It's like right updated README. Updated README.
Oh no!
No.
Filter those out.
Let's see. Oh no,
you had a bot.
It's a bunch. It's a bunch of essentials code. Yeah.
Oh, I kept saying extensions. I meant to say essentials. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm so curious how that all got in there. Like, I actually don't know.
They must have merged in your commit history.
Oh, really? Oh, cool.
Yeah, I did that. I did that with a project recently myself. iCircuit 3D always had iCircuit 1, classic iCircuit, as a submodule, and it was just gross, and I was getting tired of maintaining them. So I merged the two repos together.
Whoa.
Which was kind of crazy because the original iCircuit had something, let's just say 10,000 commits. I forget the number. And then iCircuit 3D itself had 3,000 or 4,000 commits. And so it was amazing to just bring in like this entire history in with like one commit.
That's cool.
I get nervous when doing that kind of stuff, but man, it makes the network look fun.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, I'm looking through all, it's cool I can go to the commits, and yeah, it's all the essential code, which that was, by far, I've worked on a few projects in my days, and working on essentials directly with the engineering team, and it was like me and Leibowitz and John Dick. And we're just like slapping code and like community members. I was like, man, that was like, it was like pandemic time too. So it was just like, we're just like going, you know what I mean?
I guess so.
So it was before and during, I had a lot more time at the beginning there. That was fun. So that's cool. That's cool that I didn't know you could do that. So I learned something new today. That is for sure.
Yeah, there's graceful ways to do it and ugly ways to do it. I think I did it mostly gracefully, but that's really cool. Number 13.
Number 13.
I'll get you a t-shirt. I'm number 13.
It was a lot of old code. So I take zero credit.
All 100% rock solid, bug free. I remember never having to debug that code live with you.
Yeah, never. Not once, that's for sure. Anyways, yeah, I think it's worth discussing because it just happened. Sorry, everyone just coughed into the microphone. And I think that, you and I often get questions like, or we're just working on projects like, oh, I just need this control or that control. And like, now there's some more controls, right? Like now they're kind of I've always considered kind of the community toolkit, and now this like more in the box, which is cool, especially if it's like in the templates, which is really neat. And yeah, I'm excited to try them out. I'm excited to try the new template when it lands. I'm assuming GA release date. I don't know, something like that.
I appreciate that it has all the dark mode styling too. So
yeah,
I'm still not sure I know 100% how to do all my dark mode stuff. I do it in kind of a hacky way in all my apps. And so I hope to actually learn a bit from the template too.
Yeah.
This is cool, especially because I literally have someone I'm going to dump all this stuff on.
I like
check all this out.
Yeah. And if you are super interested in getting your .NET MAUI apps on .NET 9, which I would recommend, .NET MAUI support policy is only 18 months after release. So, always be moving. It's very different than the .NET.
Always be upgrading.
Always be upgrading. That's just how we do it in our Xamarin days and now our .NET MAUI days. But I did update. I'll give you my quick .NET 9 upgrade stories.
Oh, you've done all your apps? Okay. Tell me, please. Yeah.
So I upgraded I upgraded the .NET MAUI workshop that I have, smaller app, but still meaningful. And also the eShop app, the architecture eShop app.
That's right. Yeah.
Hmm? So
are they just on GitHub? Where are those? Are those?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So one is on the .NET GitHub /.net/eShop. And that's like the Aspire one and all that stuff. And .NET Presentations is the other org, and it's the .NET MAUI workshop. It's all there. I have pull requests there. You can take a look. There's a few fascinating things. And like the eShop is more interesting because the engineering team jumped in because I was like, hey, I get these warnings. I'm just going to ignore this warning on it and like see what that does. So there's not that many changes. There's some new compiled XAML enhancements that they made specifically in and around AOT and a bunch of other things.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm always afraid of those.
So there's a few things when you're referencing different intricacies and different patterns where you need to set the data type a little bit more. So that was what the engineers helped me on, which was good. And like, especially when you're doing like a ancestry binding, you need to specify a little bit more of what the data type is for compiled bindings to work more properly.
Oh, okay. So are you talking about like dot or like dot? Those kind of bindings?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then obviously the biggest change is that, main page is gone.
I know.
So that's
what
gone.
What did they do?
So you can still set it, but it's a warning now. You just put it in a new window. It was doing it for you anyways, but now it's there. So that was pretty good. And then
I want to thank you for reminding me about the eShop app. Again, from my friend, a nice one to recommend. This one's, if the other one's the super template, this is ultra duper, super duper, quadruple, mega template.
It's pretty good. Besides that, very minimal changes. I enabled the new collection view and carousel view handlers. I updated the Windows stuff. I updated all the NuGets. I updated the version support numbers in the CS Proj. I updated all the NuGets that I could. And that wasn't too bad. Mostly everything came across in the workshop, I was using Frame still. So good old Frame, our friend Frame, which is a frame.
I don't remember Frame. Is Frame for putting a border? Is that Frame?
It kind of was, yeah. It kind of looked like a little card with a drop shadow. Yeah. It never migrated to the new handler system. So it was always a little bit
that right?
All over the place. It wasn't recommended. So now they have deprecated it and obsoleted it, and now a warning shows up. My goal is no warnings. So you replace it with a border.
Bad for me.
You just replace it with a border. You replace it with a border. It's so simple.
I'm pretty sure I abuse frames everywhere. So
that's what I was doing. Yep. I was doing that. So that's pretty much it, to be honest with you. It was a pretty minimal upgrade migration in it, to be honest with you. So very, very simple. And if you have a Blazor hybrid app, also very, very simple as well. It's in the same pull request. But you might get a few funky things, warnings, optimizations for compiled. Yeah.
Okay.
And then additionally, some of the engineers put in some improvements to the code, not just an upgrade, but improvements where they added JSON serializer context. So the app can be, the AOT-ness can be even improved even further on some of the platforms. That does
is that a registered object? Is that just like it's out there if you request it?
Yeah. So like if you use JSON serialization, deserialization, I can link you directly to the file. Let me see if I can do this here. It's very, very simple. Actually, I'll give you the PR. It's probably even better. Yeah, here we go. Perfect. Okay. So if you do a normal serialization, deserialization, even in like JSON.NET or system text JSON, it's got to do a bunch of stuff, right? It's got to figure it out. But in system text JSON, you can use source generators. You give it the type, it will source generate all the stuff behind the hood in this thing called a JSON serializer context. So you just pass around this context basically, and instead of
okay, I get it. Yep, fine. Just a new way to register all the serialization classes that they need.
So easy peasy. And that's pretty much it. I haven't really run into any other issues. The app's working good. Everything's looking great. Super, super easy. Good to go. So clean, just delete that bin in OBJ. You're good to go, Frank.
Did you test on Mac Catalyst?
I have. That's the only one I haven't tested on. I even tested on iPhone.
I knew it.
It'll work fine. I tested Windows, Android, iOS. I have my Mac sitting over here, but I plugged in my iPhone into my Windows machine, deployed it onto my onto my iOS device from Windows with no Mac in between. And it worked great. So cool. I have faith in the Mac Catalyst version. So
it's true. If it worked on iOS, you're probably good, but you didn't test on an iPad. That's what I was asking.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
One day.
Awesome. So this is great stuff. Totally not an ad, but Syncfusion's awesome, and it's great that they've contributed so much, and it's great that you're the number 13 coder out there.
I wish.
Go James.
Well, let us know what you think right into the show. You can go to mergeconflict.fm. You can leave comments on our YouTube videos. That's the best possible way humanly possible. And there's a Discord that we never read. So you can go check that out and become a Patreon subscriber. You get bonus podcasts, patreon.com/mergeconflict.fm. You can find it in the show notes below. But that's going to do it for this week's MIT licensed podcast. So until next week, I'm James Montemagno.
And I'm Frank Kruger. Thanks for watching and listening.
Peace.